THC. More use of the drug with its higher level of THC has resulted in admissions to emergency rooms and an increase in drug counselors who see patients who are now addicted to marijuana. In the states that have legalized it, there's been an increase in children admitted to emergency rooms with accidental ingestion of marijuana. There's also been increases in robberies of people who've had monies associated with this new business. Fortunately or unfortunately at this point, because the proceeds of marijuana aren't permitted, they can't be put into banks. So the people that deal in the business, even in the states that's legalized, they now become robbery targets. Synthetic marijuana today has been formulated to stay one step ahead of the laws that regulate marijuana. The manufacturers change the chemistry just enough that it's legal, but has the same effects. Slowly, our laws are trying to catch up to this issue. By purchasing marijuana from a dealer on the street, you've now exposed yourself to someone who probably can get you other harder drugs or sells those drugs himself. Of course, this does not mean that everyone that smokes marijuana will use other drugs, but it increases the chances of other drug usage. Longtime substance abuse expert Mike Gimmel said he agrees that marijuana use does not lead to chemical dependence for that or other drugs, but can open a social gateway, which in turn leads to more illicit drug use. Yes, there is no proof that anyone that uses marijuana moves on to other drugs because they build tolerance to it, like alcohol or cigarettes, in which they need more of the product to get something stronger to get their fix. But 80% of addiction is due to environment. So especially for children, if they are exposed to an environment where people are drinking or smoking pot, they are much more likely to enter a world where they can find drugs like heroin or cocaine. So I consider marijuana a social gateway drug. Approximately 67% of Americans say they do drink an alcoholic beverage on occasion. This makes it a drug with the most exposure in the U.S., with it being sold at liquor stores, package stores, distributors, bars, and restaurants. What can parents do to help their teens have the right attitude about the usage of alcohol? It's actually fairly simple. Of course, teens see what parents do, and that makes all the difference. And even if parents are saying, don't drink, don't do drugs, but the teens see the parents drinking too much, well then, what are the teens going to do? They're going to think that getting drunk is okay. 12% of young adults who have abused prescription opiates had a prior drug usage, according to clinical data from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health. The prevalence of previous substance use was 57% for alcohol, 56% for cigarettes, and 34% for marijuana. This shows that all these drugs can be gateway drugs. Parents must be vigilant if they do find their teens using drugs. They must take action. Try counseling, punishment, closer monitoring of the teen activities and the friends until the usage is stopped. If there are no consequences, the teen will have little or no reason to change their behavior. Teens that use alcohol and other drugs have a higher chance of engaging in sexual activity or other risky behaviors. Tobacco is the last one. It has seen a decline in popularity and usage since the Surgeon General for the United States has confirmed that tobacco products cause cancer. In 1965, 42% of the U.S. population reportedly used tobacco products. In 2012, it is now down to 18%. Obviously, there's been a great amount of progress made with cigarettes. There's still those work to be done. Here in our own state of Pennsylvania, it's illegal to buy tobacco products if you're under 18, but it's not illegal to possess them. 43 other states currently have laws that prohibit the possession of tobacco products by minors. This loophole needs to be closed. Also, all tobacco products are taxed in Pennsylvania, except for smokeless tobacco products. This makes those products cheap and more attractive for teens. Recently, e-cigarette usage within the 6th through 12th grade category doubled in the year 2012. This new method of using nicotine is not yet regulated by the FTC. The American Cancer Society and National Lung Association both have spoken out against e-cigarettes. They don't believe the claims that they are better for people that use nicotine. The products have not yet been tested properly to know if they are safer than regular cigarettes. In closing, alcohol, tobacco products are legal and should be used according to our laws. Marijuana is currently illegal in Pennsylvania. All three substances can develop into a dependency that could possibly lead to more addictive and dangerous drugs. Zero tolerance is the best advice for the usage of any of these substances for young people until they reach the age when the substance is legal and they can make a better informed choice. That's all I have tonight. We'll hear a lot more from the other speakers, but these three drugs, in my opinion, from what I've seen in my almost 30 years in law enforcement, are the beginning sometimes of a bad road. Some people drink and use alcohol and nicotine and they don't go any further. But many times they don't start with what you saw up here on the stage. And as you know, it can end in the deadly examples that we've seen. So thank you.
Next we have Lieutenant Robert Johnson with Pennsylvania State Police on the impact of crime on the community.
Good evening. Thanks for taking an important step to changing your community. I can assure you that the members of law enforcement in this auditorium have your best of interests in mind, and I can tell you without a doubt that they will go above and beyond to ensure that your community is safe and changes for the positive. Had a lot of time today to think about what I wanted to say this evening, and you're going to see that everything is going to come full circle. You saw the little skits. So the daughter went to jail, she eventually died, and you saw the one with the mom. And the one with the mom really got me, because did you know that it was a mom until the girl said mom? Well, I'm here to talk to you tonight about the impact of crime on the community. I haven't introduced myself yet. My name's Bob Johnson, and I've been a trooper for nearly 23 years, and the vast majority of my career has been spent engaged in drug interdiction. So I have quite a background in this. Before I can talk to you about the effects of crime on the community, you've got to understand what your community is. Well, your community is white, it's black, it's male, it's female, it's old, it's young, it's doctors like you saw in the skit, it's mothers, it's athletes, it's members of the chess club. They're rich, they're poor, and this drug, heroin, knows no boundary. It doesn't care if you're the rich kid or the poor kid or the doctor. It wants you, and once it gets its claws into you, it doesn't let go. Rarely, after taking heroin for the first or second, maybe the third time, are you feeling the effects of the drug. Your need for the heroin then becomes sustenance, so I can be normal while your body's just ravaging itself. So, it's not like the other drugs, where there might be a high or low or whatever. It's a maintenance, it's a sustenance drug. You heard the chief speak about gateway drugs. He's spot on. And if I seem like I'm squinting, it's only because the lights are killing me right now. So, the problem with heroin is this. When you use heroin, you're either going to die You're either going to need to use it the rest of your life because you can't get away from it, and in the rare case, you might escape its grasp. And you'll hear a gentleman talk about that later tonight. So, now that you know who your community is, everyone sitting out here, and what heroin wants, we can talk about the effects of crime on the community. Again, couldn't wind up better if I wanted it to. You saw the mom ask the daughter for money. That's where it starts. Hey, Bob, can you give me some money? I need a little help. I need some money. And then they tap Bob dry, and they move on to Matt. And then they begin to sell all their personal belongings. Now, mind you, everything's going to come full circle, and you'll see where I'm going. So they sell the things that are most important to them, whether it be an antique knife from their grandfather or something that's precious to their grandmother. And when those things are gone, they start stealing from their family, and they ravage them. In the skits, you saw a lot of frustration. I think that's fair to say. It escalates. Crime, the crime of stealing things from family members, then goes to the neighbors. It goes to the Walmart. It goes to the workplace. It exponentially expands until we're not talking about petty crimes anymore. We're talking about the theft of weapons from homes that are ultimately traded for more narcotics, more heroin. And then those guns get into the hands of other bad people. Everybody went to jail. When you're in jail, you get to meet some quality people. And guess what? When you're hitting your bottom, or you're in that bottom, you get new resources for finding your stuff easier. So, we've elevated the burglaries, and we've stolen a gun, and we've traded it for narcotics. And then lo and behold, a weapon that was stolen in Franklin County is used in a crime in South Carolina, in an aggravated assault and criminal homicide. Or worse yet, it's used in our community. See how it keeps snowballing? Rolling downhill, gathering steam the whole time. So, and it just doesn't end with those crimes. The last time that I remember the heroin problem being as big as it is right now was in roughly 2003. Now I would expect it would have taken 20 years for this to come back, like bell bottoms and everything else, like big cyclical things. Came back in what, about 10 years? Maybe 8. That's bad. So we need to look at how we can change our communities. We've taken the very most important step tonight to change your community. What you need to do is change the environment in your homes as well. If you suspect a loved one of being engaged in something, don't be easy on them. Tough love. Be the parent that roots through the kid's dresser and finds the things they shouldn't find. If your kid starts looking haggard, question them why. I think you're going to see when you leave here tonight, you will have a very different perspective on this problem. And again, you've taken the very first step to getting it. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Richard Wynn, the Franklin Denton Drug and Alcohol Program, and he will be discussing basic science of drug use and rehabilitation.
Probably apologize for my head. This is bright in my eyes. This is probably blinding me. First, I'd like to thank our coroner, Jeff Connor, for arranging the town hall meeting. The issues of drug and alcohol abuse are complex, and it is critical for us to all work together in its solution, whether with the criminal justice system or those who simply want to get out from under the control that addiction puts on them. We do not like to talk about our family members who have suffered with addiction due to shame. We do not like to talk about our own addictions due to embarrassment. We do not like to pay taxes for treatment because we believe the individual is at fault. And presidents' wives advise us and addicts to just say no. If only it were that easy. Treatment can and does work when done at the right time with a lot of support and adherence to the level and amount prescribed. This is also known as prescriptive integrity. So maybe not the first time, the second, the third, and so on. But the alternative is to give up hope, to fill our jails and justice system halls. Well, I applaud Secretary Tennis and District Attorney Fogel for their willingness to look at alternatives, to take a risk, because the easy thing would just be to say, we can't afford this. To search for funding sources to allow treatment to be done at the level that's prescribed. It should be noted that Franklin County is third from the bottom in per capita funding for drug and alcohol treatment among all the counties in Pennsylvania. Drug and alcohol is also one of the lowest funded human services programs. Yet it touches a very large segment of our citizenry. This must be corrected. All of this was not what I was asked to talk about. It was just my introduction, but I had to say it. But I'll come back to what I was asked to talk about, the signs and treatments. The staff did this because they're the ones who do this day by day, and they wrote the rest of this for me. And I'm very dependent on them to help you get help. The basic signs of drug use. Most people use drugs for the first time when they were teenagers. No surprise. There were just over 2.8 million new users of illicit drugs in 2012, or about 7,898 new users every day, and 52% were under 18. There are a few basic signs of drug use, but this does not mean that all children or adults will present with these signs if they are using. Signs include neglecting responsibilities, legal troubles, relationship issues, significant changes in behavior, unexplained need for money, and secretive or suspicious behavior. A person may exhibit all these or none of these signs while in active addiction. Someone would say, well, why'd you bother telling me about this? There's a lot of people don't even do any of these things and they're still using. Most people believe they can easily identify a drug user out of the crowd. The truth is that the average substance user typically does not stand out in a crowd. Look to your left, look to your right. Any of the people in this room could be substance users. There is no one distinct characteristic of a substance user that will help you identify if your child or someone you know is using. That means you must know your child and you must pay attention. Pay attention to what they do and who they are with. If you feel they are behaving abnormally and may be related to drugs, get more information. Educate yourself. Approach them and don't be afraid to ask for help from a local agency. For more information on this and the warning signs, please refer to the prevention table that was set up in the hall and the other table set up on the treatment side. We divide drug and alcohol into prevention and treatment, but it's all one continuum. Rehabilitation. Unless the client meets criteria to enter detox treatment, any individual in need of services must be assessed using a drug and alcohol assessment tool to determine what treatment services would be most appropriate. When you don't have a lot of money, you try to be as good as you can about prescribing what is necessary.
There are two types of inpatient treatment, detox and rehab. Detox is meant for individuals who need medical support while coming off of whatever substance they are using. Withdrawal symptoms that require admission to detox typically do not occur more than 5 days after last use. The typically known 28-day stay is referred to also as rehab. This is where individuals will participate in group therapy and individual sessions with a counselor in a residential setting to work towards sobriety. And when we get to prescriptive integrity, it shouldn't just be 28 days automatic for everyone, or 14 days when you can't afford it. There are two types of community-based outpatient treatment, outpatient and outpatient intensive treatment. Usually outpatient sessions occur about 1 or 2 times per week, no more than 5 hours. Intensive outpatient is 3 to 4 times per week, no less than 5 hours, but no more than 10 hours. This sounds like a lot of bureaucracy, but we've had a long time to figure out these things, and it's going to take a long time to change them. Drug and alcohol treatment is on a 100% voluntary basis by the individual. Typical drug and alcohol facilities are not secure facilities and do not lock their doors or require clients to stay if they want to leave. Individuals may leave at any time. You cannot commit an individual to DNA treatment like you might in mental health. For more general information or information on specific agencies that provide treatment services, please refer to the tables in the back, and please listen to Mr. Fogle as he speaks. Thank you.
Next, we have the District Attorney for Franklin County, Matt Fogle, speaking about this program he's with.
Right. Hi, everyone. I was about 10 years old, I think. I came here, I think, about 30 times to watch Rocky III. They charged $1.50 to come for a matinee, and never in a million years would I thought I'd get to stand up facing out this way talking to a bunch of people. Reporters asked me many times about crime, specific crimes. They asked me how prevalent specific crimes may be in our community. And just last week, I was asked about child abuse. And my answer is often the same, and it's accurate. It's that I think the public would be probably surprised to know how prevalent some things are, but that they're not necessarily an epidemic. I'm sometimes asked about drugs and drug trafficking and different types of drugs. And again, I say that the drug trafficking is kind of steady. It's not an epidemic. There aren't drastic spikes. But that people would nonetheless be surprised at how much there is out there. No one ever asked me about addiction. They asked me about crimes. And if they asked me about addiction, I would have a different answer. I would say it's a crisis. I'll say that again, it's a crisis. Nationally, Commonwealth-wide, and here locally, it is a crisis. My staff, who I think is in the audience somewhere, I can't see just that way, they hear me talk about crises and troubling times. And I always tell them to respond without panic. I'm not suggesting anyone panics, but it is a crisis, and we need to be aware of it. We've had a war on drugs since the 60s, Nixon, I believe. We've had 7 presidents since then, and we have not won that war. We have not executed that war properly. We have had 7 presidents. Don't start thinking, trying to figure out which presidents we've had since then. Why do I say this is a crisis? Secretary Tennis talked about some of the statistics. He mentioned that 1 in 4 people have substance abuse in their families. 1 in 4. 25%. 1 in 4 people with addiction will die as a result of that addiction. Get this. 1 addicted offender may commit 2 to 3 crimes per day, 3 to 4 days per week. This calculates to 455 offenses a year. Criminal offenses. We multiply that by the number of offenders, and that reaches tens of thousands of families affected by crime. And I'm just talking about crime. That's the world I live in, crime prosecution. There are many that do not commit crimes. So the stats bear it out that this is a crisis. What are we doing right now for treatment? Rick Wynn talked about some of it. There are lots of great people with very great potentials and open hearts that are committed to this crisis. But obviously, this remains a crisis, and it needs addressed. Oftentimes, we have outpatient 28-day stays that are essentially driven by money that's available. Oftentimes, as Rick mentioned, someone may need more than that 28-day inpatient. They may need more than outpatient. But given insurance, given funding available, they cannot get that treatment that they need. If you walk into a hospital or a doctor's office and you got a compound fracture, you've got a bone sticking out of your leg, you don't want to hear that doctor say that you've got a sprain. Ice it up. Put some ice on it, you'll be okay. You need more treatment than that, and you deserve more treatment than that. So what we have are shorter stays, we have outpatient, and at some point there was a cost shift from treatment to corrections. That's at a national level, state level, and county level. In 1955, there were 600,000 treatment beds in Pennsylvania. 600,000. That same year, 1955, there were 200,000 prison beds. So there were 3 times treatment beds as treatment beds as prison beds. Now, today, where there were 600,000 treatment beds, there are now 50,000. Today, there are 2 million prison beds. In 1955, there were 200,000. So we've shifted that cost from treatment to prisons, and frankly speaking for myself, it's not working. It's not acceptable. As the DA, I've been a prosecutor for about a baker's dozen years, and now I'm the DA. So my office is in the corner. I have sort of a 30,000-foot view. I happen to have my own caseload still, but I don't just concentrate on my caseload. Concentrate on the caseload of everyone in the office, and trends in this community, sister jurisdictions, and crimes. And I have to have a bigger picture view. And Secretary Tennis again was right. He said 70 to 80% of the crimes that are committed, including in Franklin County, are driven by addiction, drug and alcohol abuse. 70 to 80%. So as DA, I see the same people over and over as well. And addiction is a problem. We have some offenses that are just evil in nature. But we have 70 to 80% that are attributed to someone who's under the throes of addiction. I have a reputation, I believe, as being a tough prosecutor, an aggressive prosecutor, and that is true. And thank you, Gary, for referring to me as an icon. That may surprise some people to hear. I actually be playing the role of Peter Pan into the future. I want to be, forget tough or aggressive, even smart. I want to be effective. And I think I work for you, I work for this community, and you deserve that. And so when I began this journey into the law of criminal law and criminal prosecution, I did so because I wanted to seek justice for victims and deliver justice to the bad guys. And there's a legal definition to that, victim. It's what you would generally think it is. It's someone who's been harmed physically, or someone who's had something taken from them, what you generally think of as a victim. And that's true. And those are the people I want to help in this job. I won't ask anybody to do this, but if I did ask you to raise your hand if you've been impacted by addiction, either directly or in your immediate family, or you know someone closely, I think perhaps every hand, or at least a bunch of hands would go up. Mine would go up, okay? Several different folks, in my opinion, that have brought that into my life. It cuts across all societal lines, as Lieutenant Johnson said. We have treatment options within the criminal justice system, and I get frustrated as a DA, as a law enforcement officer who wants to be effective. And what I see far too much of is us literally checking blocks, literally. A block in the sentence and keep checking it, hoping that treatment is done, and from our 30,000-foot view over the whole system, seeing that it's not. So, I'm trying to make myself an expert. I'm reading a lot of materials at night about this thing called addiction. And I'm not anywhere near an expert yet, but I've talked to a lot of smart people who are experts, including Secretary Pence. And there, what I found is this. The level of care is the most important thing. And get this, undertreating can lead to treatment resistance or increased progression of the disease. And that's what we're doing because of the funding. If someone needs to go to 6 months inpatient residential treatment, but they're being assessed as outpatient, meaning outpatient, that could potentially be a progression of the disease. What happens if you take half a dose of an antibiotic, or half a dose of insulin, or half the treatment you need? Doesn't work. You get sicker. And at some point you tend to lose hope that this is ever going to change, right? The number one predictor in successful outcomes, overcoming addiction, is the length of treatment. There are a lot of things happening physiologically, psychologically, in one's brain in dealing with addiction and overcoming addiction. There are lots of pathways. I'm going to dumb this down a little bit because I don't understand it. I'm not an expert, but essentially lots of pathways in your brain are being utilized during the course of the disease. A lot. And the first thing that has to happen is those pathways have to be undone. Okay? It's a time-consuming process. Next, new, good, positive pathways have to be built. Both things have to happen. And it's a time-consuming process. That's why the length of stay is the number one predictor of successful treatment. I believe treatment works. I am a proponent of treatment. I'm a proponent and not an opponent of treatment, so long as it is the right treatment, so long as there is prescriptive integrity or clinical integrity. I met with the chiefs of police here in this county. It's been a number of months ago now, and I believe not only for myself but for the rest of the chiefs, it's our duty to exercise leadership in this community. This isn't just a criminal justice issue. I recognize that. But we can play a large role in it. We can exercise leadership. I like the word audacity. And I think united with the chiefs and everyone in uniform, we can make a difference here. There's definitely an opportunity for hope. There are lots of charges that the police deal with, lots of acts that occur where charges could be filed, but they're never filed every day because someone doesn't report. Maybe it's a family member of an addict that just doesn't want to report it, even though goodness knows they almost had enough but not quite. And they don't want to completely ruin their family member's life by injecting it into the criminal justice system. Maybe having a felony record, having job problems at some point. And so oftentimes there are crimes within families that don't even get reported. What we have to do is break the cycle. We are losing within the criminal justice system. We just are. And we have to talk honest about it, or it's just going to be the same old thing. And I got to tell you, that's not acceptable to me. We believe with the criminal justice system having punishment potentiality there's a real opportunity to leverage that to enable someone to get the help they actually need. So in your programs, it says feed the good wolf on the front. And so I'm going to read that parable to you right now. It's something I like a lot. There's an old Cherokee chief teaching his grandson about life. And he told the young boy, a fight's going on inside of me. It's a terrible fight between two wolves. The one wolf is evil. That wolf is full of anger, sorrow, regret, greed, self-pity, and false pride. But there's another wolf inside, and that wolf is good. That wolf is full of joy, and peace, and love, and humility, kindness, and faith. He said to his grandson that this same fight is going on inside of you. It's going on inside of all of us, every day. Every person on earth. And the grandson ponders this for a moment, and then asks grandfather, which wolf will win this fight? And the old man smiled and simply said, the one that you feed. The reason this initiative that I'm about to talk about is called Feed the Good Wolf. It's something that the coroner mentioned. This needs to be positive. In my view, having raised two children, as soon as you tell someone not to do something, that thing, whatever it is, immediately becomes interesting. And that's the most thing anyone wants to do in the world. Once you tell them they cannot do it, that's the thing they have to do. If we can show people that they can do something positive in this community, in their lives, in their families, then A, they don't have time to address it and to feed an addiction or the bad look. But they may just grow to feel accepted into that and not want to disappoint someone else either. So I really like the positivity of that Feed the Good Wolf, and we're using that as a name for the initiative that you're going to see coming here in a number of months. I'm working with the state and trying to get some funding available for the program that we call Feed the Good Wolf. The specific plan is that at an interaction where the police have investigated an offense, they determined who did it, there's two options that can happen there. There's the standard what we do now, right? Someone's going to be arrested, they're going to go to jail, prison potentially, or put on probation, depending on the offense. There's a standard thing we're good at. We do it all the time. We know the playbook. What's going to happen here, once we work out all the kinks, is that someone is a suspect, police officer identifies who it is that brings them in. And I haven't seen the Matrix. I think I'm probably the only person that hasn't. But I hear that there's a scene where there's two pills put down and someone has to make a choice. So it's sort of like that. The police officer says, hello, I am rock bottom. We're meeting right now. This is happening today. This could go one of two ways. It could be the standard, go to jail, go to prison, or you can accept this opportunity for life, this gift of life. And what this gift is going to be is the long-term residential rehabilitation program. Not every offense is going to qualify. Certainly violent offenses will not qualify for that. But in doing this, if someone completes the program, that charge for them will not be filed. It won't be on the record. And the key to this, the key to get me at the table to agree to this is that clinical integrity. Funding has to be secured to support it. Once we have that, we'll be able to support that long-term residential setting that's absolutely critical and absolutely necessary. The expected results are as follows. Number one, practically speaking, it's costs. Every dollar spent in treatment saves $7. If medical expenses are included, that raises it to $11. Those with untreated addictions, the medical costs are 8 to 12 times that of the general public. And often the uninsured treatment costs would be absorbed by the hospitals. So there will be cost savings, practical savings to taxpayers. Less days in incarceration, which is not cheap. There will be savings in court time and judicial costs. Days as employees rather than on disability. And most savings come from treating the most severely addicted individuals. To me, the most important part of this is probably the restoration of families. There's a lot of people hurting out there in our community, a lot of people. And it's because of addiction. And if you've been in a family that's had that injected into it, it's absorbing. It's almost obsessive for those that are around it. And it absorbs everyone, not just the immediate nuclear family, but everyone around it. And maybe friends are run into that. And this is an opportunity to actually get treatment that's necessary and restore that brokenness. There's a lot of people hurting in this community. Another key is to reduce crime, obviously, and to reduce recidivism. That word means repeat offending. We don't want someone to continue to commit crimes. Someone may have some latent criminogenic tendencies. They may not otherwise commit a criminal offense, but you put a drug addiction alongside it, and then you may have someone commit crimes who likely wouldn't otherwise. So naturally, logically, you remove the drug addiction from the person. What we're hoping for is that this person then doesn't have these criminogenic tendencies coming before. There will be a reduction in addiction. And, I consider myself about as patriotic a fellow as you're going to come across, and love this country. And I look around and I see countries like India and China doing this and this and this. And I look at us and I want us to keep doing this and this and this, and getting better and better and better, economically and otherwise. And not everyone is in the game. We have too many that are not citizens. It's as if we were all helping someone move, and we're all moving a couch. There's too many people in that one corner that are just sort of pretending that they're lifting, and they're not really lifting. And we want everyone contributing to what we're doing here. We want people to achieve, and that's why I speak a good wolf. We can do the same old thing, and we can lock people up. I got no problem locking people up if that's what they need, believe it. But we need to be effective in what we do. And when we've got 70 to 80% of the people committing crimes doing it just because they're addicted, then it's not rocket science to understand. Then we just need to remove that addiction and figure out what the best way is to treat that. We can't just keep doing the same thing again and again and expect things to get better. We need to take risks. We need to do something different. I'm going to end with this, and Carrie Gray is in the building. I'm stealing this from her. I like the Feed the Good Wolf story, but I like this one not quite as good, but it's close. There's a community that's having a celebration. The whole community is present. And they have a river that runs through this community, not unlike Conacutt here in Chambersburg. That's not a river there. So there's a big celebration, the whole community is present, and they're having food, there's music, good time. And someone sees a baby floating in the river, and they're distressed, and they move to the river banks and pull the baby out. And almost as soon as that baby is pulled out, 2 or 3 others come floating downstream as well. As more people witness this, they go to the river. As more people go to the riverbed, more babies are in this river coming downstream. It's a crisis. Everyone there is assisting, except 2 people. 2 people were running upstream. And everyone looks at them sort of astonished, saying, hey, we need everybody to help here. Don't you see what's happening? And those 2 say, well, you do this, we're going to go upstream and find out who's throwing these babies in the river and stop it. They're getting to the root cause. There's a manifestation with the addiction that may come in terms of crime. The crime will be dealt with. What we're not doing, we're not getting at the root cause. We need to stop whoever's throwing the baby into the river. Thank you.
Our next speaker is the victim, Lynn Hostetler,
Good evening. I want to apologize up front if I become a little emotional as I speak to you, because it's difficult to talk about the loss of a loved one. In the summer of 2002, if someone had come up to me and said, Lynn, your niece Dana is a drug abuser, drug addict, I would have said, you're nuts. She comes from a loving family, 2 parents, grandparents. She has a sister that she adores that attends Shippensburg University. She's an athlete. She plays softball and basketball, and she has the most beautiful voice. In fact, at that time, we wanted her to try out for the American Idol show. So she couldn't be a drug abuser. And then if that person asked me and said, would you believe it if I told you Dana's only going to be with you 6 more months? She's going to die of a drug-induced suicide. And I said, no, not my Dana. She's 18 years old. She's just got accepted to Shippensburg University. She's going to be there in the fall. And then the final statement that this person says to me, and do you know the only person that knows Dana's dark secret? And I said, no, she didn't have any secrets. And the person would say, your daughter, Mom, her beloved cousin and best friend. And I said, no. Molly is a senior at Chambersburg High School. Yes, Dana and Molly have been best friends since birth, Dana being a year older than Molly. As families, we did everything together, even though Dana lived in a small community outside Johnstown, Pennsylvania, called Salix, PA. But we would do everything. Anytime we could have a chance, the 2 families would go to the beach, or Dana would come to Chambersburg, or Molly would go up to Salix. So, yes, they're best friends, but Molly would have said something if Dana had a secret like that. I'd like to share with you tonight the red flags that were there, but we never noticed them. Dana did come to Shippensburg University, and we were so thrilled. Here she was, just 20 minutes down the road from us. We felt like every weekend Dana would come and visit with us. But that didn't happen. See, Dana kept going home on weekends. And one weekend, when we were going up to visit family, we offered to pick Dana up. She got in the car. She slept the entire ride up to Salix. And then it started happening. She was vomiting. She was not sleeping. And she was complaining that she might need to drop out of school because she had what we thought was the problem. She had endometriosis, a female problem, and we thought, well, maybe this is causing her to be so sick. And lo and behold, in November, she did drop out of Shippensburg and went home. That Thanksgiving, we didn't realize it was going to be the last time that we saw Dana. We went up, and her mom was the best cook, and we had this wonderful Thanksgiving dinner. At Christmas, we went to see my family, so we had decided to wait and go to Salix the weekend after New Year's. Unfortunately, though, on January 2nd, 2003, I was sitting in my office at the Tuscarora, in the Tuscarora School District, where I was a school counselor, and I got a phone call. It was from my husband, and I thought, oh, this is strange. He doesn't usually call me at work. He said, Lynn, are you sitting down? And I said, yeah, something wrong with my kids. See, besides Molly, I had an older daughter, Katie, and a son, Brian. He said, no, they're fine, but I think you still better be seated because Dana took her life today. She shot herself. I said, what? He said, yeah, she committed suicide. I said, well, how could a disease like endometriosis cause a beautiful young girl to want to kill herself? Then my husband said, Lynn, I'm going to Shippensburg University to tell Jamie, Dana's older sister, I need you to go to the Chambersburg High School to tell Molly. I said, how am I going to tell Molly that her best friend, her dear cousin, had just died? Well, I called my friend who was a counselor at the Chambersburg High School and I said, you've got to help me with this. This is going to be really, really tough. So we called Molly down, and between myself and Janet Martin, we told Molly that Dana had taken her life that day. And at that point, as Molly just started screaming and yelling, how could this be? How could this happen to us? And I said, it has happened, Molly, and now we have to get ready for a funeral. So we went home, we packed, and we headed to Salix. When we got there, remember we had not been there for Christmas. So my mother-in-law, Dana's grandmother, Molly's grandmother, had our Christmas gifts, and she always gave us money and cards. And she handed me mine and my husband's, and she said, open it. And I opened it, and there was no money in it. She said, that's strange. Then she said, well, maybe you better open your children's cards. So I opened Brian's card, and there was no money. And then I opened Katie's card, and there was no money. And then the last card I opened was Molly's card, and there was no money. She said, that can't be. Dana helped me put the money in the cards. We just did it the other day. So things were starting to not add up. We went to the funeral, and it was the worst thing I've ever gone to. To go to a child's funeral, so difficult. Young women and men were crying, sobbing. How could this happen to this girl who had everything going for her? After the funeral, we headed home. Molly drove with Jamie back as far as the exit off the turnpike for Shippensburg University. And I drove with my husband. When we got to the exit, Molly climbed into the car with us. And I turned to her and I said, Molly, what is going on? And at this time, I'd like to introduce my daughter, Molly Hostetler-Wynn, and she will tell you the rest of the story.
Dana's addiction story was pretty short, and I was a part of most of it. It lasted about a year and a half. I was in 10th grade. Dana was in 11th, and she fell in love with a boy. Like my mom said, we were best friends, so we shared everything. She was very excited about him when I went up to see her fall of my sophomore year. She said, Molly, he has introduced me to something amazing. I really want you to try it with me. Now at that point, Dana and I, we were really involved in things. We were athletes, we were in choir. So I wasn't sure what to expect from let's try something. We hadn't had alcohol, we hadn't had cigarettes. You know, what is she getting me into? She said, I have some heroin under my bed. I want you to do it with me. It's the most amazing feeling in the whole world. And I was really taken aback. The only visual that I had of heroin at that point was a junkie on the street corner shooting up with a needle. She said, you know, before you lose it, all this is a little packet of powder. You snort it up your nose, and you're going to have the most amazing high you'll ever experience in your life. So I thought about it for a little bit, and decided not to do it with Dana that day. I'm still very thankful that that decision was a good one. I'm a mother now of one, and I have one on the way, and it just, you know, thinking back, had I made that choice, how different my life would be, or, you know, would I even be standing here today? So I said no then, and that was a good choice, but the rest of the choices that I made going along with Dana's addiction were not that great. I left Salix that day, kind of wondering what to do with this new information that I had. I held it in. I didn't say anything to anyone, and kind of hoped that it would go away. I went back to visit her a couple months later, and her addiction had gotten worse. She said she went from using at just on the weekends to now using during the school day and at work. She worked at a little ice cream stand. I was amazed that she was able to function, but she said that she actually felt like she functioned better on the drugs, and that nobody knew that she was using. She could just use whenever she wanted. I was starting to get really worried about her, and I again didn't know what to do. I had lots of feelings. I had feelings of fear. I was angry at her, that she was doing this to herself. But it never really, it crossed my mind, but it didn't seriously cross my mind to tell someone about it, because I was afraid. I was afraid of what my family would do. I was afraid that Dana would get into serious trouble, that she would be taken away and her life would be over. I was afraid that our friendship would be forever gone. So I didn't say anything. I also had this stigma in my head of what a heroin addict was, and I thought that Dana was the only person out there that had the face that she did of a heroin addict. I didn't know that there were other heroin addicts that, you know, were so beautiful and so involved. So I let it go. Dana continued her addiction. It continued to get worse. That winter, her story changed me, you know, from wanting me to be a part of this heroin addiction with her, to grabbing me and holding me and saying, please never try this stuff in your life. She went through withdrawal a couple of times, which she said was like the flu times 1,000. And she told me that she quit, and I knew that she didn't, but I let myself live with that denial, because I didn't want to know about it anymore. I didn't want to have that burden. Less than a year from that point was when I got the news that Dana had committed suicide. It was by far the thing that has shaken my life in so many ways. It was 2003, and it was supposed to be an amazing year. That was when I was supposed to graduate from high school. And I did, but it was definitely overshadowed by my best friend's death. There will always be an emptiness in our family. There's going to be somebody missing. You know, she was missing as a person in my wedding, somebody to be there with my kids. She loved children. But I wish that I had heard something like what's going on tonight. Identifying those faces of heroin addiction is so important because I think there are others like myself who don't realize that it can really touch anybody's life very quickly and ruin it very quickly. I think it's also good to take that stigma away. And, you know, maybe had I known that there were possibilities of positive treatment options for her, and that, you know, maybe she wouldn't have just been carted away right away, that I would have stepped forward at that point. I miss her very much. And it sounds like 2003 was the last time that heroin has been as big as it is now. So I hope to be a voice to anyone who has that family member or friend, son or daughter who is experiencing addiction and needs help, and to go out there and get it for them.
In conclusion, I will have to tell you, 1 month after Dana's death, Molly came back. And she came into the home and she said, "Mom, you won't believe it. A 11th grader at the Chambersburg High School just died from an overdose from heroin. Her name is Jennifer Robinson." At that point, I knew this heroin epidemic was not in Philadelphia. It was not in Baltimore. It was not in New York City. It was not in Sailors, Pennsylvania. It was here in Chambersburg. We have a problem. This year, on June 21st, Dana would have turned 30 years old. In her memory, Molly and I are doing this to say, plead to all of you, don't get started with this drug. We feel like with Dana, it probably only took one time and she became addicted. It's a horrible, horrible drug. Please, let's put a stop to it. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Joel, I'm going to butcher this, Jabowski.
Joel's good.
Joel, we're going to go with Joel. So Joel is an expert and will discuss his own personal experience and how he defeated this.
Thank you.
It's really great to be with you, and yes, the legs are as bad as everyone described. I can see the front row, basically. Thank you, ladies, for sharing that. No matter how long I've been working in addictions and actually coming out of addictions, I thank God that I have never lost my sentiment, passion, or compassion for every story. It's what motivates me. It's what motivates my wife. We have decided, I believe probably several years ago, maybe before we even knew it, that God had led us to commit our lives to this fight against addiction. I'm a graduate of the Teen Challenge program. In 2003, I entered that program with 20 years of addiction. I entered the program at 36. Half my life had passed, and I had tried several other options. I had tried all the standard cultural simple solutions for my complex problem: outpatient, counseling, groups.
And I have the highest respect for all of those organizations, and we need them. But like most of us discover, and as many have mentioned, the level of care and the duration required to reverse addiction is complex. Because you see, the brain is complex, and that's where addiction brings its affliction. Where there's a process of learning in the process of recovery, there is also this arduous process of unlearning. 2 + 2 = 4. I don't have to unlearn that, I don't have to relearn it. 2 + 2 = 5 has to be unlearned. I showed up at Teen Challenge with a host of 5s. After 20 years of addiction, I had found myself suicidal, carrying a rubber hose in the trunk of my car, waiting for the right alley to go down. That day, believing I will connect this to my exhaust and relief will be found. I don't know exactly why that was thwarted from my intentions. My level of hopelessness just never completely tapped out. But hopelessness is the feeling of addiction, and my is overwhelming. Ironically, what we find through the process of understanding that it can be reversed is that we can also thwart the hopelessness. But you know how that happens? When families like these come forward, and we come together as communities, and we start to speak out against it, and we start to get educated. We start to affect policy through our lawmakers and through our local politicians and legal officials. And I'm so proud to stand among the officials that have come here today to speak, who also share this passion to be relentless against the insidiousness of addiction. By the time I got to Teen Challenge, crimes per day, per week. At one point, I was living in a crack house, selling crack cocaine in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, to support my habit, incurring offenses throughout the day, 4 to 10 times a day. My personal life incurred a minimum of $500,000 to $750,000 worth of damage to the communities that I affected. I was 30 pounds lighter than I am now when I came to Teen Challenge. I was 129 pounds. I was $17,000 to $25,000 in debt, had soured every relationship in my life. I could not believe that I was actually at a place to where I couldn't get out. I swore that eventually, no matter how bad it got, there would be some inner fortitude that would pull me out. No such thing exists. Addiction is not biased, and it's been said over and over again throughout this town hall meeting. Like a malaria mosquito, if you extend your arm to it, it will have you as its host. And so what we have to be doing is figuring out what are the prevention methods, what are the ways to educate families and individuals. It was my family's understanding they finally got the 3 C's of addiction. I think they learned it just through their hardship and experience with me, but as it turns out, it's a clinical understanding. The 3 C's of addiction are this: you cannot cause another's addiction, you cannot control someone's addiction, and you cannot cure someone's addiction. It was my father's tough love. This was the 80s that I began my addiction, but it wasn't until the 2000s with the amount of fatigue that I had incurred to my family, because addiction is by no means an individual affliction. Addiction is a family affliction. Families must be healed. Family systems have to be healed, or even when that loved one goes away and gets that help, if they return home to an unhealthy, uneducated, unhealed, disempowered family dynamic, the chances of success are next to none for that addiction in the family and that individual. It was my father who said, with tears rolling down his face, "Joel, you cannot live here." Couldn't believe it. I think I realized at the moment, past my anger and resentment of the addiction, fighting to survive, that my father must really have indicated in me a real issue that his power couldn't resolve. And he understood that what I'm probably going to have to do is be motivated by pain. Imagine that. I'm going to submit to you that the freedom of addiction is found and motivated by the pain of addiction. What I want to do is explain a couple of things about addiction that I think will provide you as a sense of empowerment. I don't know if you, and I think you, I'd like to believe that you got the message tonight, is not the inundation of 1,000 stats. It's not the inundation of 1,000 newspaper articles about the epidemic. The overarching theme here is not why or look at what is happening, but the theme here is what are we going to do about it? This is the approach we take to all the dramas, the crises in our society and in our personal lives. Getting stuck on the why, there will be no movement of change. We have to step into what are we going to do about it, and how can we use this to the betterment of our community and in our lives. And so I want to give you some things to understand what the relief came for me. It certainly speaks about levels of care. We have to understand that the change of addiction is never found in removal. Sobriety is never enough. Addiction has to be a process, and recovery has to be a process of removing the addiction, but then filling the gaping hole that demands an investment. Because that is in the heart of every person, to invest their life in at least one thing they prioritize. We don't know how not to do it. And so where I have removed the investment, the worship, if you will, of the addiction, my heart craves something in replacement. Unless something goes in there that speaks to healthy resolve, healthy coping mechanism, healthy relationships, healthy self-image, self-esteem, by default, I would probably reduce back again in my bouts of emptiness, back to that one thing that had filled me and sustained me, because you see, addiction is not an event, and it's even something beyond the process. Did you hear that I had 20 years of addiction? Do you also understand that I was not alone? Certainly isolated within the confines and the bondage of my own personal addiction, but yet the member of a subculture. Addiction is a culture. Like larger society, it provides acceptance, self-acceptance, intimacy, status. It's all in the culture of addiction, although the cost is taking our lives. What we cannot get from larger society, we find comfort in, even at the cost of our lives, in the culture of our addiction. When you're asking someone to come out of their process of addiction, you are asking them to come out of everything that keeps them safe in their culture with the inability, not unwillingness, the inability to recognize their true need for change past the oppressive nature of addiction, the biological changes of addiction, and the cultural needs of addiction. I want to share with you very quickly, and I want to respect my time. I know that I only have about 20 minutes, and I appreciate your time, and I want to respect it. Here's what we have to understand, and this is certainly what I hear happening from the DA, who I know personally, and I know his heart for addictions, and I stand with him on the front lines, as do the other officials here. I do. Addiction is not thwarted by prison time. Addiction really doesn't care how much time you give it. Addiction will just wait for the gate to open. Addiction will lie late in the person until it's resolved and intervened, until that person has a beard down and good grades alike. Addiction is not thwarted by punishment. Addiction requires great levels of external motivation continuously that promotes the necessity for internal change. So here are some things that I would like to share with you that are considered the myths of addiction. These can also be found on the Teen Challenge website. And then I want to share with you a little bit about my wife and I's motivation, and specifically the organization that my wife has founded. Because I believe that what we need is education as individuals. I think we need also policy change, certainly community change. That's what I see happening here tonight. But it begins with us individually. If someone we love incurred some rare ailment from Botswana, you would be the local advocate on everything to do with that ailment. You'd be able to tell me the local treatments, the recent developments, the manifestations. You would know it all. Why is it that we have this armchair understanding of addiction? Why do we not see it as an affliction, an ailment that requires a high line of education to be empowered to rise above it and respond to it appropriately? Where have we decided that we understand it without the education? We need education, folks. I didn't say experience. Experience can be a liar. Experience will keep you emotionally bound. We need education. Blended with a skillful experience, perhaps. One of the myths of addiction. Overcoming addiction is simply a matter of willpower. You can stop using drugs if you really want to. Prolonged exposure to drugs alters the brain. There's no two ways about it. It alters the brain. That will result in powerful cravings and a compulsion to use. These brain changes will make it next to impossible to ever quit by sheer force. Shaking out will from someone we love and saying, we didn't raise you this way. You're stronger than this is wind coming out of your mouth into an empty cavity. That person is not unwilling to get help. They are, in addition, they are unable. The changes that alter the brain, one of the primary places that affects the brain without getting into all the neurology, is it affects the executive functioning in the frontal lobe, the decision-making process. When this has been impaired, to expect that someone then will deliberate conscientious, healthy resolve is to some degree asking for more than the person is capable of giving. In the brain, you know a social dilemma, and I know you maybe have heard it through like sociology classes and such, and it's the starving man who steals in order to feed himself for the urge of self-sustenance. In other words, there's an active part of his brain that understands to some degree, although the man has never been unethical in his life and is revered in his town, he's now caused to step away from his own value system in order to survive. I will submit to you that in the brain of this man, for 20 years, there was no deliberating on whether I thought my coping skill of addiction and drugs and alcohol is an option. In the limbic system of the brain, fight, flight, and freeze, in the addicted mind, affected in the limbic system, the words that come to the brain when the urges come and the conflict faces the addict is not, that would be interesting to resolve. The words are survive. Survive. When there is a mechanism and voice inside of the brain of an addict through biological change and oppressiveness, ethics, values will have to be second to survival. The brain screams survive. I don't know why he does these things or she does these things. We never raised her this way. When the brain is screaming survive, the starving man will steal. I'm not making any justification for the fact that a person does not have to own those decisions, especially decisions who have ever picked up to begin with. The process of recovery is absolutely a challenge to that person's level of ownership and having to own the primary decision to use. But we as family have to also understand that once the addiction is taken into that stage 4 of lifestyle breakdown, dependency, and addiction meaning behavioral manifestation and lifestyle, there is no longer a window for reason. The window now is always closing. As the wind pours from the mouth of the addict incapable of making change, you're always closing. You need treatment and nothing else is an option. And that's finally what my father did. And that's what he sided up my family with, to also understand that we're leaving this decision up to a human being that is incapable of making the right decision for their life. Another myth of addiction. Addiction is a disease, so there's nothing you can do about it. Most experts agree that addiction is a brain disease, but that doesn't mean you're a helpless victim. The brain changes associated with addiction can be treated and reversed through therapy, medication, exercise, and other forms of treatment. This takes me very quickly, as a quick segue, is that addicts have to hit rock bottom before they can get better. That's not true. Does a person have to get to a place of willingness for change? Yes. Hitting rock bottom is the suggestion that we as family and loved ones are powerless and must somehow stand on the sidelines and watch the degradation of our loved ones as they crumble to the divisiveness of addiction. Inaccurate, antiquated, outdated thinking. We as family have the greatest form of leverage to bring about the difficulty of that decision making and any other force known to the addict by a process called raising the bottom. No longer standing idly by, realizing that in my attempt to bring resolve to this individual, what I'm actually doing with lack of education, acting purely emotionally in response to the addiction, I'm propagating the addiction. Not only is it not bringing resolve, it's actually causing the person to go deeper into the addiction as I begin to enable the process. The demand of addiction is greater than any one person in addiction's ability to meet it. It absolutely requires you. It required my father's rides and money. It required my sister's shelter. It required my mother's meals. It required everything that I had spent every other resource on to be funded then by my family so that I can stay the same in my addiction, never having to experience the consequence of the addiction. The process of intervening on your loved one will absolutely be counterintuitive to everything that you know in your love for them. You will not be able to rely on your feelings to manifest the change required in your loved ones. You will have to rely on duty in the form, love in the form of duty, not in the form of feelings. And you know what that's going to require? An education. And it may even require a guide to walk you through that process by way of intervention. Education is one of the things that we need. There's another myth that says you can't force someone into treatment. Treatment doesn't have to be voluntary to be successful. What's the alternative? To wait for the person in their mess to reach their willingness by the natural consequences of their own degradation? Or up the consequences by no longer enabling them, not bailing them out of jail, not paying their phone bill, not giving them a ride, exacerbating the pain and discomfort in a way that the family then offers a gift for that person to enter into the process of treatment by way of that motivation. Better that I have a person in the care and throes of those who are designed to bring about resolve and to hopefully carry that individual from a state of ambivalence to a state of action. To get that person, while in the culture of change through our treatment centers, to have even the remote possibility to be internally motivated as opposed to watching him do it on his own in the devastation of his own addictive choices. If I find a person in quicksand, whether they think it's a swimming pool or not, I'm going to pull that person out by their eyelids, whether they are emotionally attached to that or not, because there's a force inside of me that is inside of you that we do not support death styles, we support lifestyles. If you didn't feel that way, we wouldn't be talking. We as human beings support life. We don't need emotional attachments to people's awareness of their need for life. We impose life if we have to. It is the basis of our legal system, it's the basis of our hospitals, it's the basis of recovery centers. I'm asking you to take your own volition as individuals, let alone coming up with and joining forces with your community officials and agencies, by all means. But as individuals, let's start getting education and start actually learning how to appropriately respond to addiction, not based on some school of emotional thought or experience. There is an absolute education on how to appropriately and inappropriately respond to an addicted loved one, how to motivate an addicted loved one, and how to keep them in it. Well, I would like to tell you that my wife and I, just so you have at least one resource before you leave, and literature's on the back table, my wife and I offer free family educational programs. If it's at a great distance, we ask for a gas reimbursement. We will offer free educational programs. You can come to my wife's office in New Cumberland, Pennsylvania, where you can get a list of where we do our educational programs. And I assure you that by the time you leave, you will leave empowered and added to. Not only maybe for your own addicted loved ones, but even for the many that come into your path. Let's begin at least with an education as families. The number one preventative factor for our youth to not enter into addiction is education. So we also have youth programs where we go into programs through Teen Challenge, through Stay Sharp programs, also free of charge that work on a gas reimbursement. I am so pleased to be a part of this group that had the courage to come out and to give everyone here the time and attention that you gave. But my real hope to know that victory and a resolve came as a result of this is that you will step into action, not just an awareness. We can't get enough awareness through our newspapers and personal experience. When will we be motivated to actually take a stand? One at a time. One at a time. My wife and I will be available to you to answer any questions you have. We have resources for you. I know the other panel members would be more than willing to offer any assistance they have. And I so thank you for your time and your devotion against this epidemic that's taking out our families, this county, our state, and our nation. Thanks so much.
At this time, we're going to have a question and answer period, so if all the speakers could come up on stage. We will have volunteers walking the aisles, so if you have questions, you can flag one of them down. We're going to turn the lights up a little bit so we can see you from the stage. And if you do not feel comfortable asking a question, you can ask someone that's holding a microphone and they will ask it for you.
Thank you for your time. I want to start off by introducing myself. My name is Austin Memphis. I'm a student at Shippensburg University in Criminal Justice Program. I wanted to direct this question towards Matt Fogel, Franklin DA, and Chief David Arnold of the Chambersburg Police. I think Feed the Good Wolf is an excellent program, but there's also another concern I have in another department that kind of lines up with the program. And so I want to start off with a few stats to entry you into my question. According to the U.S. Census, Chambersburg has a population of around 20,268 people, a 13.47 population growth over the last 10 years. And the crime index value, which for you who do not know is calculated on data using algorithms, is an indicator of the crime level in a region. Higher crime index results in more crime. On the U.S. standard, 1,723 is the crime index. On the PA standard, it is 1,382. In Chambersburg, it is 2,117. The reason I'm bringing this up is crime is currently an issue in our rising town. And I also came across some facts showing in our town, enforcement employees of 34 members of 34 seems a little diminished in my opinion. When you scale this up on a standard of 100,000 across the United States sits at about 335 employment officers per 100,000. The PA standards at 307 per 100,000, and Chambersburg is averaging about 166 per 100,000. My question is, being understaffed at about 50% or a little more in enforcement employees, how are we going to enforce this other program along with the programs already stated?
There's a number of formulas out there to figure out how many police officers your jurisdiction had. I mean, obviously, if we had more police, we have things for them to do.
There's no doubt about that. The real question is, what can your community afford? Because the fact of the matter is, police officers and the resulting costs are expensive. We do the best that we can with the resources that we have. Some of the things have changed in the last 20 years, 30 years. We have computer technology, we have different programs to engage with the public, community policing, things like that. That policing is extremely different than it was 30, 40 years ago. That being said, everybody likes to see boots on the ground. They like to see walking in their area. But like we've been talking about up here, the addiction and the result of substance abuse, it starts at the family level. A police officer can't get into every family and solve those issues. Like the worthy DA earlier, I could put my hand up because I have a problem in my own family too. So, you know, we're just like everybody out there in the audience. The numbers, I don't know what the answer to your question is. I can come up with a lot of statistics too, but the problem is your communities today in the last 5 to 7 years, our country as a whole went through an economic collapse. And so during that time, there's been a lot of reduction of different services across the United States, not just police. I hope, like all of us are, we're optimistic people. We're starting to come out of those times. And so hopefully the numbers in policing and other fields of government that have taken extreme hits, like we talked about substance abuse. I mean, even worse than the hits I've taken. And I agree with the DA, the investment in just prisons, well, we proved that's not going to get us out of this crisis, and that's not going to fix the substance abuse. With the DA, I think maybe try and handle a couple of your issues too.
Thanks, Chief. As I understand your question, I believe it was that how will the current manpower at the Chambersburg Police Department be able to absorb this program to be the good one? Perhaps it's my fault, maybe not articulating what the program is. Essentially, in terms of policing, there would not necessarily be any change at all. It's what happens after the criminal or suspect is identified. What happens after that, that changes. That mindset that changes, and it's not based upon the type of crime. It's not necessarily based upon the history of an individual, but what it's going to be based upon is that assessment of addiction with that clinical integrity that we've been talking about. So as far as policing goes, police are good at detecting crime. They're good at investigating it and finding out what happened and what needs to be done. And what the change is with Feed the Good Wolf is what happens next. And that's where we're going to partner closely with our friends in drug and alcohol and open up these avenues that have been closed now because of funding and get some folks into long-term residential treatment and open up that source that we don't have right now. Yeah.
One of the things that the biggest demands on the police are to deal with crime. And what we know about doing drug and alcohol treatment with clinical integrity is that it has a dramatic reduction, results in a dramatic reduction in crime. We have a program run out of our Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. It's called Restrictive Intermediate Punishment Treatment. It takes people that used to be sent to jail or prison and puts them into treatment done in clinical integrity. They do a really good job. It's an excellent program. Researchers, there's a big study that's about to come out that's going to analyze this over the years. If those who've gone into treatment, the recidivism, that is the re-offending rate at 2 years after completing all of the program, is 13% at 1 year, 16% at 2 years. Now, if you think about these individuals, these were folks that were committing crimes, they were committing serious enough crimes to get locked up. They were suffering from an untreated addiction. What are the chances that person would have stopped committing crime if they hadn't gotten treatment? The overwhelming majority of those people would be reoffending. So we find it tremendous. There's a lot of research on this, and it's really only because we haven't really, as a society, given attention to it. This is the most cost-effective way to reduce crime. And when you reduce crime, that does have an impact on the level of policing you need. And this does cut down on crime and create safer communities.
Mr. Vogel, this is for you also. I think that that program just sounds dynamite, and I hope that it takes off with wildfire and goes across the nation. But my question is, how are the centers, the treatment centers, determined? Is it always going to be 6 months, or are you saying that they'll be given an assessment option? Is that what it is first, so that it's not necessarily long-term treatment?
That's right. The issue, as I see it right now, is that given the funding, those assessments that may require a long-term residential setting that have been unavailable. So that it's going to be based upon that clinical assessment. Clinical assessment may very well be less than 6 months, maybe 3 months. It may be outpatient, but it's going to be based upon that clinical assessment as the standard is.
And then how will the inpatient centers be determined?
That is under development.
And will faith-based organizations be included in those options?
But for license, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I guess it's like a more personal example. Like I didn't mean in any way to tackle the program because I think it is a great idea. But around 2 years ago, this is a personal story of mine. I was 17 years old at the time. It was about 3 a.m. I'm woken up in my bed by a man trying to break through the window, and he comes through the window to break and entering. I see the knife in his hand, and I realize this is a loved one of mine. I'm like, you know, this isn't right. But thankfully, I tried to do what I could. I talked him down. I said, hey, you know, this isn't okay. You realize what you're doing. You realize whose house you're in right now. That you know us. He jumped out the window. He left. I called the cops, and it took 40 minutes for the police to arrive at the scene of the breaking and entering with a deadly weapon. And luckily, like I said, I knew this he was loved one of ours. We talked him out of it. He ran away. He was later found. But my worry was, if that would have been a stranger that night, I probably would have been killed if he had the intent to do so. And with a 40-minute arrival time on breaking and entering with a deadly weapon, that's what scares me. And that's why I brought up the situation. When later they did find out, like, he was like into the drugs, he was highly intoxicated, he was on cocaine. That program would have been a wonderful thing for him. That's why I agree with you. You know, if this was instated, that would have been a great path for him to take. Unfortunately, it's not available at this time. But that's my main concern is, you know, with the program to work in the function to life, what if there's not enough officers to get there quick enough in these dire situations? I'll give an example like that.
Myself and my fellow cohort under the lieutenant always want police services to be delivered as quickly and as safely as possible. But there are situations, and I can't speak to yours to know what was going on that night, but the response wasn't better. We always want it to be as professional and as quick as it can be. Realize that police, when they're dispatched by priorities. What would have been going on that night at the same time your incident was going on, I don't know. They could have been at a robbery. They could have been at a number of other high priority incidents. But that's something that we have to deal with at times. You know, even if you have 5 officers on the street on any given night, when you go to a domestic call, you got to send 2. So if you have 2 domestics going on at the same time, there's 4 of your guys that are tied up. You only have 1 left. So unfortunately, we would love to have more manpower, but we have to deal with what we have available. And I can only say I'm glad the result turned out well in your case, but we always strive to have police available for those priority calls.
Well, I'm just thinking while you were talking about it, I was thinking, I would guess that individual, I don't know, obviously, might have been locked up before, might have been, this is the first offense? Okay, well, that's a serious first offense. Okay, thanks. Well, what I was going to say is very often, people who do that, they're doing that over and over.
Yeah, the charge is
Charge is really about that.
which is astonishing. Because like if there was a program like this, the charges, you know, necessarily wouldn't have been dropped. They could have went to a program. But But in the current system, like without that program, with it, they do have an alternative route. So he was facing potentially 4 to 8 years in prison, if not more, because when the police went to the scene, he resisted arrest. But the relative that went through, like, they dropped all breaking and charges. So in his case, he got off lucky. Luckily today, he is doing a lot better. He found his own path, his own way. That's why I said the program is stated would be an excellent idea. But to get them into that program safely before harm comes to them or harm comes to, citizens is what I was concerned.
Yes, I have 2 questions. One, for Secretary Tennis, I was happy to learn that you're developing some prescribing practices. I work at a healthcare organization, and I review a lot of prescriptions for prescriptive inconsistencies, if you will. I just got a group together, and we're going to meet Thursday so that we can develop our own prescription best practices, if you will. So what you develop, will that be available to the public? Is that something that I can take to my meeting on Thursday?
We have, so I've got several staffers here who are working this evening and are here, and let's talk afterward. Yes, one of the things we want to do is put these guidelines on our website, as well as we're asking the Department of Health to consider putting it on their website as well. These are the initial round of guidelines, and we're going to continue to flush them out. These are general guidelines for doctors. We want to kind of build in what are they called, hyperlinks, where when we talk about spotting somebody with addiction and knowing what to do, that we have a hyperlink so that they can go find out more information, or if there are various issues where there are, you want to kind of have the ability to get more information. But one of the things we learned with the doctors is that if you have something too long, because they're so overloaded, or they're not going to read a 30 to 40 page document, so we're trying to find guidelines that are simple, short, sweet, simple, helpful for the doctors. And there are a few basic things you can do. They did these in Ohio about a year ago. They developed them, and apparently it's had a dramatic impact. But they're actually sitting there for our Department of Drug and Alcohol Program employees who will give you information to get you those sooner. I don't know how many days it's going to take to get it up on our website, but we'll get you those.
In your guidelines, are you addressing like morphine equivalent for the primary pain reliever and then the breakthrough pain that a lot of our providers give our patients? Because that's something we're addressing, letting them know that basically your breakthrough medication has a higher morphine equivalent than your long-acting medication. So we're trying to get them to realize that and to stop double prescribing, if you will.
Right. With those, I don't know that it specifically gets into that issue of that. I'm going to go take another look at it. It was an interesting meeting. I was running the meeting, but I was with a bunch of doctors, so it was really, we were facilitating it. We will get you there are actually several sets of guidelines. We have the ones that we adopted for Pennsylvania, but our pain prescribing is occurring in different settings. So oftentimes, probably most of the time where we're running into a problem is when primary care practitioners, the family doctors, are prescribing to deal with chronic pain, and they don't really necessarily have enough information about how to avoid addiction, checking for personal history or family history of addiction, knowing are the people taking tranquilizers, are they taking other medicines that are going to interact badly? There are also other ways to deal with chronic pain other than prescribing opioids. There are electronic stimulation methods, there's cognitive behavioral therapy that's effective, physical therapy, acupuncture. There are any number of ways, and there also needs to be a shift among our healthcare practitioners to, instead of eliminating all pain, because life sometimes just has some pain, either physically or emotionally, that's just the way it is. But getting away from that, we want to eliminate all pain to the focus of restoring functionality. Because it may be that I can eliminate all your pain as a doctor, but you might be sitting like a zombie on the couch and not be functional. So really trying to shift that orientation toward functionality rather than having zero pain. So we will get you what we have, and we're going to continue to develop further guidelines for emergency departments, and we're going to be certainly inviting other specialists to develop, the specifics for their specialties.
Okay, thank you. And my other question is for Mr. Vogel. A few years ago, I came to meet you, and I wish your Be the Work program was in place then. A few years have gone by, and we're desperate for your program. Is there any way that there is anything that you can do to mandate maybe some rehabilitation
I'm sorry,
or
the
a,
last part?
basically, when I came to you,
Yeah.
I was at a standstill for, loved one as far as getting help. Now that a few years have gone by, my loved one still needs help and is in a position now where the authorities can make that decision for my loved one. And I'm wondering, I know that Be the Wolf isn't up and running yet, but I surely have a wolf that needs feeding.
Well, I certainly, I remember you, I remember those cases, and those are the types of cases that have brought me to this point, quite frankly. Understanding what pain people are going through and how that spreads throughout the family. The way this would work is if someone has committed a criminal offense and therefore had an interaction with the police now.
And she does.
Okay. To the extent that that's prospective and this program is up and running, then it certainly would be an option.
Okay.
But it wouldn't be an option for anyone who hasn't committed a criminal offense necessarily. However, we could certainly identify those individuals who are in need of treatment, and certainly we have a partnership now that's probably better than it's been in a long time with drug and alcohol.
And we would definitely need that as soon as possible.
So,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Isn't there Senate Bill 100 that if they're incarcerated, they can absolutely be mandated to treatment if the person is willing?
That's the thing. I don't know how willing.
It might just be something to look into. Just a thought.
Reinvestment initiative, which did not have, I think some of the thinking behind it going in was that there would be a dramatic expansion of drug and alcohol addiction treatment in the system. I don't think there was that much. There are some therapeutic communities behind the walls. There's one in Chester County. There are a few around in our state prison systems. Some of our county jails have them. Again, just getting to both issues, the issue's really funding. Right now, nationally, we pay for enough treatment. Talking about treatment with clinical integrity, we pay for enough treatment to treat one person for every 10 people with this disease. This is the disease we picked. We could have picked heart disease or diabetes. We picked the one that's driving 70% of crime, causing suffering in 1 out of 4 families. Pennsylvania does a little better because we have strong insurance laws, so we pay for enough treatment for 1 out of 8. But we are fighting hard and actually working with your, with Rick Wynn and with your DA and our Department of Public Welfare to try to expand access to treatment through our Medicaid system, health choices system, to try to get that, because Medicaid covers drug and alcohol treatment in Pennsylvania. And it's supposed to cover what the level of treatment you need. So that's really something that's very different than in other states, because it's a bill called Act 152. We're really working hard to try to draw down those resources to get more. Under the governor's Health of Pennsylvania proposal, those with drug and alcohol addiction or mental health issues would be deemed medically frail, which means they would be eligible for Medicaid. So anyone under 131% poverty level would be able to get Medicaid and get the treatment they need under Medicaid. But we have to get that turned on so that the people can actually pull down those resources. That would be the governor's plan will actually lead to a dramatic expansion in resources for treatment.
I have a question regarding the availability of treatment places. I don't know particularly about drug and alcohol programs, but in other areas of mental health, there seems to be a pretty good delay in people getting treatment, getting appointments, that type of thing. So even aside from the cost of the program, are there facilities available for the Feed the Good Wolf program?
Rick can answer this as well, but yes, there are facilities out there for that. And it may be that we stretch those facilities. I can tell you that as resources for treatment and different modalities of treatment increase, those modalities increase. Our programs are ready to expand. Our problem now is to send enough people into treatment and pay for enough treatment to keep those programs running, because they do a good job. But Rick can speak about your specific network.
Well, I was going to tell Gary to show me the money, but we haven't had problems getting people in once we know we have funding to pay for them. And I'm sure it'll stress us with the number of assessments that I figure will happen under the program. That's all part of our problem to try to solve and figure out. Yes, there are some shortages across the state. Shortages are even worse in inpatient psychiatric hospitals. We try to, at times, look at the problems people have, not just from drug and alcohol or substance abuse, but also dually diagnosed with mental health issues too. But right, they will have to develop more facilities than are currently available, or more beds and more counselors. But there have been a lot of people in counseling that out of the field. I think if we have the funds to pay for it, they will do it again, as Secretary Tennis mentioned.
I don't really have any more questions for over here. But probably Joel, I know Stan, and Lynn. I guess I hear a big message of education. So my question is this message, has it been taken to the schools, to the kids? That's my first question. I mean, I just think the real life situations speak volumes. I mean, if I had all of us and, choked up, I would hope that it would have the same effect on the kids.
When you're talking about the message, are you talking about like the Feed the Wolf program, or just the drug and alcohol awareness and prevention?
Actually, I shorten the Feed the Wolf presentation. I take Joel's and kind of dumb it down a little bit to kids. His information's phenomenal. And then just the straight up story of Lynn and Molly. But, I mean, I knew, wasn't it Cindy, you had that program running for years at the courthouse, and why our district, this is Chambers work, but why our district never mandated every student to go through that is still beyond me. It was there, you had volunteers, the education was available, we just didn't take advantage of it.
One of the things I can say in terms of public education, it's a challenge in terms of drug and alcohol awareness. In my opinion, we don't do enough. I would be surprised if we'll ever do enough. I think part of the reason behind that is the nature of what we do. We're there to educate, and unfortunately, when we spend a great deal of time and money with drug and alcohol awareness and things like that, we hear a lot about not doing what our mission is. Now, that being said, my personal opinion is, in working with high school students, it's something that's very important to us. One of the things that I find myself doing up at the high school, and Lynn may talk about at the elementary level, I don't know, but I talk a lot with students about two things. One is understanding what normal is, especially if they come from a family where there is substance abuse or things of that nature. And the second is decision making about where they find themselves. We heard Molly talk about she was presented with a situation where she could have tried heroin, and she made that choice not to do that. Now, I don't know if that was her parents' influence or what that was, or personal influence. Something influenced her to say, no, I don't want to do this, possibly seeing the potential consequences.
And so what we do spend a lot of time with children doing is talking about decision-making in terms of life choices, not just substance abuse, but other things that can have a significant impact on their life. What we don't spend as much time doing is specific drug and alcohol awareness. We do some through our health classes, we have our student assistance programs and things like that, but we don't have, specific programs to address those issues.
I also like the fact that Joel's saying, once you take something away, or even before you get into addiction, why can't we figure out what they can become part of, something bigger than themselves, that adds value to their life, for a purpose? I don't know if it's organizations around our community that solicit these kids in the schools to get volunteers, to make themselves part of something bigger than who they are, and give them value and avoid. I'm the one who wants to go find out who's throwing the babies in the water. And
one of the things that's a challenge with that is some of our students who do have a tendency to experiment with substances, sometimes it can be a challenge to get them involved. There are opportunities for some students, but unfortunately the students that become involved are students that are very active in a lot of other things. I think the biggest challenge is the at-risk students. If we identify students who are at risk, how do we get those students involved? I was talking with Lynn just a minute ago in terms of at the high school level, we have students who we may have found either to be in possession of substance or possibly in possession with intent to sell substances. And we as school administrators, we can search their lockers, we can search the individuals, and we can recommend that charges be filed against them. However, in terms of treatment, we can't recommend treatment. If I were to say to a student, you can't come back to the high school until you get yourself treatment, we then are responsible for paying for that. So I think it comes back to funding again. When Matt was talking about the Feed the Wolf program, that would be wonderful if there was kind of the junior Feed the Wolf, Feed the Coyote program, or something like that for high school students, so that when they're...
Don't forget, it's a good wolf.
The good wolf.
Don't just say wolf.
The good wolf.
The bad or good one. Good wolf.
yeah, I would
But
tell that story to my kids.
it would be wonderful if we had that, so that when we saw a student who was at risk, we could say, here's what we're going to do for you. Here's the gift we're going to offer to you that basically may not cost very much, if anything, at that level, which may prevent seeing somebody end up in prison and still having a substance abuse issue.
All right, this is a very naive subject to the police department. Do you ever do anything with parents who provide party scenes and make an example out of them? Because I know initially as a parent, I probably would have thought, well, I was a kid one time, that's what I did, and let it happen, and I've had a change of thought on that. And then I sit there and watch these parents provide the place for them. I know there's always, where there's a will, there's a way, but have we ever made examples out of the families that are allowing the parties to happen at their houses?
In those cases where we're able to determine who has contributed to the alcohol or narcotics as part, we go after them quite rigorously. The problem in doing any of that is that most times you're relying upon the people that were there to go after those persons. And while it seems very simplistic that, hey, I was at his house, he gave me beer, it's not always that cut and dry, and I think Fogo would agree with me on that, as would the chief. So, yes, we do, to figure out where. We have hotlines set up where you can report parents throwing parties and things like that. And I can honestly tell you, in the nearly 2 years that I've been at this station, I bet I've seen one or two of those reports come across. But that takes me, it's a perfect segue into what I was going to say as I was sitting here. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm trying not to be too loud. We can develop many programs across the board here. District Attorney, Secretary, schools, and law enforcement. We can change laws and make things so that we won't tolerate this. But ultimately, and I dread to think that I'm looking at it too simplistically, if if we as parents, we as community members, don't take the first steps to doing anything and being involved. It might be as little as talking to your kid, and you may know your kid inside and out. But what about the kid that hangs out with your kid, that you know that he's not in the best family or so on? We have a shared responsibility in making everything better. Whether it's curing a drug problem, whether it's helping the old lady who needs her grass cut. I'm not trying to get too wishy-washy here, but if we become better neighbors, cut the old lady's grass without her ever having asked, then all these things kind of go away. You know, Joel said his dad grabbing hold of him, shaking the life out of him didn't change anything, it was just air. Well, how many of us have grabbed a hold of our kid and just did that? Made you feel better, but then you felt instantly bad, so that you had to find an alternative way. We can't rely on the services or the system to fix every problem. They are really the end result. Parents, kids, teachers have to get involved from the get-go. We need to be leaders in our community. And the leader could be the lunch lady, it could be the guy, the crossing guard, whomever. We need leaders. And I think everybody has to step up.
To piggyback on that a little bit, when Molly talked, she talked about her fear of letting somebody know that there was a problem. And I think that's one of the things we have to do is lose that fear, to know that we're going to be helping somebody by saying something or doing something. I know that in the school setting, one of the things we will do, we do use children youth services. So we will have, reports from children of things that either their parents are doing or the parents are doing in front of them, or at the high school level that parents are doing with their children. And we will report that to Children Youth Services. Now, I can tell you that doesn't make us very popular with parents, because if it's something that is not viewed as a significant problem, then we're really interfering. We don't have a problem doing that as long as that starts the process of change. But that's one of the agencies that we will use. We will use the Children Youth Services to start that process.
I apologize, but we're going to have to close this out. But we all will be around afterwards if you have any additional questions that you would like to ask us one-on-one. And I'd like to thank everyone up here again for taking the time to come out and educate the community.